All right, so today we are going to deep dive into the California fire crisis. As you probably know already, 2020 was a really bad year for fires in California. And the fires scorched an area. Well, actually, you know what? It's kind of hard to picture how much area burned. It was over 4 million acres,
Wow.
which is, get this, bigger than the entire state of Connecticut.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it really is hard to comprehend their scale.
Yeah, so we are going to talk all about that and the impact of the fires. But what's really interesting to me and what we are going to focus on in this deep dive is how these fires impact everyone, not just California.
Yeah, I mean, the effects are far-reaching. It's not just about the immediate damage from the flames.
Exactly. So to kick things off, can you give us a little bit of background on just how bad these fires really were?
Well, I mean, like you said, the scope is mind-blowing. 4 million acres, billions of dollars in damage, thousands of homes lost. But it goes deeper than that, There's a deeper cost.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize just how far the impacts reach. I mean, I was reading that the smoke from these fires travel all the way to the East Coast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It blanketed major city in this hazy smog.
So even if you weren't anywhere near California, you were still breathing in the consequences of these fires.
Exactly. And you know that smoke isn't just a visual nuisance, right? I
Right.
mean, it carries with it a whole host of health risks. We're talking about respiratory problems, cardiovascular issues, even increased risk of certain cancers.
It's pretty scary to think about. So it's not just about the immediate danger of the flames, but also these long-term health impacts. So
Exactly.
we've established that this is a big deal
Huge.
with consequences that extend far beyond California. But what is actually fueling these monster fires? I mean, California's always had dry summers, right? So what's changed?
Well, it's a combination of factors, but climate change is definitely playing a huge role. You can think about the California landscape like this giant tinderbox, right?
Okay.
And rising temperatures are basically drying out that tinder, making it more flammable.
So it's like climate change is cranking up the heat
Yeah, and exactly.
and creating these bone-dry conditions that are just ripe for ignition.
Precisely. And then you add in these prolonged droughts, which are becoming more frequent and severe because of climate change, and you've got this, perfect storm brewing.
Oh, wow.
And to make matters worse, we have these stronger winds driven by changes in weather patterns, which are also linked to climate change.
Right.
And these winds act like bellows, fanning the flames and driving those fires across the landscape
Yeah, it's terrifying how fast those fires can spread.
with terrifying speed.
Okay, so climate change is a huge part of the equation. But I was also reading that our attempts to actually fight fire may have made things worse, which seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that seemed like a good idea at the time, but it ended up having some unintended consequences.
So can you explain what you mean?
Sure. So for decades, California and many other parts of the world adopted this policy of aggressively suppressing all wildfires.
So the thinking was to put out every fire, no matter how small, to protect lives and property,
Right, exactly.
which seems logical on the surface.
Yeah, it does. But what we didn't fully grasp at the time was the role that fire plays in maintaining these healthy ecosystems, particularly in places like the California forests.
Right.
You see, natural low-intensity fires would periodically sweep through these forests, clearing out the underbrush, thinning out dense stands of trees, and creating this mosaic of habitats.
So it's like these fires were nature's way of cleaning house and preventing things from getting too overgrown.
Precisely. And when we suppressed all those fires, we essentially disrupted that natural cycle. All that dead wood, fallen leaves, and undergrowth that would have been burned away just accumulated on the forest floor.
Getting a massive buildup of fuel.
Yeah, massive buildup of fuel.
So it's like we unintentionally turned these forests into giant tinder boxes, just waiting for a spark.
Exactly. And when those sparks inevitably came, whether from lightning strikes down to power lines or even human carelessness, those fires had an abundance of fuel to burn, leading to the massive, uncontrollable infernos we're seeing today
Wow, so our good intentions totally backfire.
in a big way.
And to make matters worse, we keep building more and more homes in these fire-prone areas, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to another key factor in this crisis, which is something called the wildland-urban interface.
The what?
The wildland-urban interface is kind of a mouthful, but it basically refers to the zones where human development meets or intermingles with wildland areas.
So think housing developments built right next to forests or sprawling suburbs pushing further into fire-prone canyons.
Exactly.
And as more people move into these areas, we're seeing an increase in the number of homes at risk from wildfire.
A huge increase.
It's like we're building ourselves right into the path of danger. But how does living in these, what did you call it?
Wildland-urban interface areas.
Yeah, wildland urban interface areas. How does living in these areas actually increase fire risk? I mean, isn't it just about being close to forests?
Well, proximity is part of it, but there's more to it than that. Think about the materials used in construction in a lot of these homes. Wood siding, shake roofs, even landscaping with highly flammable plants. All of these things contribute to the risk.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Then you add in things like wooden fences, decks, even firewood stacked near homes. You're essentially creating a pathway for fire to spread quickly from the wildland into residential areas.
So it's not just about being near the woods, it's about how we're building and landscaping our homes in these areas that can significantly increase the risk.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the human factor. Accidental ignitions from things like downed power lines, equipment malfunctions, even discarded cigarettes. These are major causes of wildfires, especially in these zones where human activity is so intertwined with the wildland.
Yeah, it really drives home the point that our actions, both intentional and unintentional, plays a significant role in igniting and exacerbating these fires.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not even negligence, but simply the realities of living in a modern world. Sparks from a car's exhaust, a lawnmower hitting a rock, fireworks. These seemingly innocuous acts can have devastating consequences in these dry, fuel-laden landscapes.
Yeah, it paints a pretty sobering picture, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about the human costs of these fires. We've talked about the environmental impacts, but what about the people whose lives are upended by these disasters?
Well, one of the most harrowing aspects of these fires is the experience of evacuation. Imagine being jolted awake in the middle of the night by sirens and flashing lights, knowing that a wall of flames is bearing down on your community.
I can only imagine the fear and panic that sets in, especially knowing that you might only have minutes to grab what you can and flee.
Yeah, one of the sources I read described it as feeling like your world is collapsing in on you. You're forced to make split-second decisions about what to take, what to leave behind, knowing that you might lose everything.
It's like a nightmare scenario playing out in real life.
It is, and even for those who manage to escape the flames, the trauma of that experience can be profound. The constant fear of fire, the anxiety of rebuilding, the uncertainty of the future, it all takes a heavy toll.
Yeah, and it's not just about the immediate loss of homes and possessions. It's about the disruption to communities, the scattering of families, the emotional scars that can linger long after the fires have been extinguished.
It's a collective trauma that reverberates through these communities, impacting their sense of safety, their livelihoods, their very identities.
And amidst all this chaos and heartbreak, there are these incredible stories of resilience, communities coming together to support each other, strangers lending a helping hand, acts of kindness that offer a glimmer of hope in the darkest of times.
It's truly remarkable to see the human spirit shine through in these moments. Neighbors helping neighbors evacuate, sharing food and shelter, volunteers pouring in from all over to offer assistance, firefighters risking their lives to protect people and property. It's a testament to our capacity for compassion and courage in the face of adversity.
Speaking of firefighters, their dedication and bravery are truly awe-inspiring. They're on the front lines of these infernos, battling fatigue, smoke inhalation, and the constant threat of shifting winds and unpredictable flames.
Yeah, it's a grueling and dangerous job, and many of them are volunteers. Ordinary people who put their lives on hold to protect their communities,
Incredible.
leaving their families, their jobs, their own homes to confront these raging infernos, often working for days or even weeks on end without a break.
It's a level of sacrifice that's difficult to comprehend.
It is.
They're true heroes, putting their own lives at risk to save others.
And their work goes far beyond just battling flames. They're often the first responders to reach people trapped in burning homes, the ones who provide comfort to those who are lost everything, the ones who offer a beacon of hope in the midst of devastation.
And they're doing all of this while facing increasingly dangerous conditions. Because of the growing size and intensity of these fires, it's a testament to their courage and commitment. But let's not forget the emotional toll this takes on these brave men and women. They're constantly exposed to trauma, loss, and the sheer scale of destruction.
Absolutely. The mental and emotional burden they carry is immense. They witness unimaginable suffering, confront their own mortality on a regular basis, and often return home with scars that run deeper than any physical injury,
You're right, supporting their mental health and well-being is crucial.
both during and after these deployments.
You've really highlighted the human side of this crisis, the courage, the compassion, the resilience, but also the immense toll it takes on individuals, families, and entire communities.
And it's important to remember that these fires don't just burn out and disappear. The impacts linger long after the flames are extinguished. There's the long process of rebuilding, the emotional scars that can take years to heal, and the ongoing threat of future fires that hangs over these communities.
It's a stark reminder that the California fire crisis is not just an environmental issue, it's a deeply human one, with far-reaching consequences for people's lives, their health, their well-being, and their sense of belonging. It's a crisis that demands our attention, our compassion, and our collective action.
I couldn't agree more. It's easy to just focus on all the bad stuff. But, amidst all the ashes, there's a glimmer of hope. California is actually becoming a living laboratory for innovative solutions.
Okay, now that's what I like to hear. So what kind of solutions are we talking about? Are we just throwing more firefighters at the problem, or is there a deeper shift happening?
Well, it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, firefighters are undeniably crucial, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
And their bravery is just beyond measure. But we're also starting to rethink our whole relationship with fire itself.
So you mean not just putting out every single spark we see?
Exactly. Remember we were talking about how fire suppression kind of backfired?
Yeah.
Well, there's a growing movement towards embracing fire as a natural part of the ecosystem.
So are we just letting wildfires burn unchecked? I mean, that seems a bit risky, right?
Not exactly. It's about using fire strategically, in a very controlled way, to mimic the natural fire cycles that these landscapes evolved with.
So I've heard the term prescribed burns. Is
Yeah,
that what you're talking about?
exactly. So prescribed burns are intentionally set, controlled fires that are carefully planned and executed by trained professionals.
So they're basically burning away the excess fuel on the forest floor
Right,
to reduce the risk of those catastrophic wildfires later on.
exactly.
I picture these teams of experts, strategically setting small fires and managing the flames, almost like conducting an orchestra of fire.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy. These burns are very carefully orchestrated, taking into account weather conditions, wind patterns, the types of vegetation present. It's a real science, and an art, too.
And what about the smoke from these prescribed burns? Don't they contribute to air pollution as well?
That's a valid concern. But generally, the smoke from prescribed burns is less intense and shorter-lived, especially compared to the massive plumes of smoke from those uncontrolled wildfires.
Right.
Plus, they're conducted during specific times of the year when weather conditions allow for better smoke dispersal.
Okay, so it's a calculated risk, with the long-term benefits hopefully outweighing the short-term inconveniences.
Exactly. And the benefits go beyond just reducing wildfire risk, too. These prescribed burns also play a really crucial role in restoring forest health.
Really?
Yeah. They clear out invasive species, promote the growth of native plants, and create a mosaic of habitats.
So it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes.
Beautiful analogy. It speaks to the interconnectedness of nature. But, prescribed burns are just one piece of the puzzle. California is also investing a lot in other fire management strategies, like forest thinning and fuel reduction projects.
So we're not just burning stuff, we're also clearing out the underbrush and creating more space between trees.
Exactly. You can almost think about it like weeding a garden, but on a much, much larger scale.
Yeah, I get it.
By removing that excess vegetation and creating what we call defensible space around communities, we're essentially breaking up the fuel continuity that allows fires to spread so rapidly.
So it's like we're creating fire breaks, but instead of bulldozing lines, we're using chainsaws and strategic thinning to reduce the fuel load and slow down the advance of flames.
Exactly. And these efforts are often done in collaboration with local communities, engaging residents in the process and empowering them to take ownership of their own wildfire preparedness.
That community involvement seems really crucial. It's not just about top-down directives, it's about fostering a sense of shared responsibility for wildfire safety.
Absolutely. And education plays a huge role in this too, teaching people about defensible space, fire-resistant landscaping, and how to prepare their homes for a wildfire. All of that is essential.
So it's about shifting the mindset from just reacting to fires to proactively mitigating risks. It's about building a culture of, what did you say?
Fire-adapted community?
Right, fire-adapted communities.
Yeah, and California is really leading the way in this. They've implemented these strict building codes in fire-prone areas, requiring things like fire-resistant roofing materials, ember-resistant vents, and defensible space around structures.
So even the way we build and design our homes can play a role in reducing fire risk.
Absolutely. And they're also working on improving early warning systems and evacuation procedures, learning from past mistakes and incorporating new technologies to get people out of harm's way more effectively.
So I was reading about these AI-powered fire detection systems. They can actually spot wildfires in their early stages using cameras and sensors to alert firefighters even before smoke becomes visible.
It's incredible technology, and it's proving to be a game changer in terms of early detection and rapid response. And then there's also the development of these real-time fire modeling and prediction tools. They use weather data and fire behavior algorithms to predict the path and intensity of fires, so that helps firefighters strategize their response.
So we're moving from a reactive approach to a more proactive and predictive one, leveraging technology to stay one step ahead of the flames.
Exactly. But it's not just about the technology. It's about combining those innovations with traditional knowledge, community engagement, and a deep respect for the power of fire.
It's like we're weaving together the best of science, technology, and human ingenuity to find solutions to this incredibly complex challenge.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just happening in California. All these lessons learned, the innovations, these strategies for building fire-adapted communities, well, they're being shared and adapted all over the world.
So California is sort of becoming a model for other regions that are grappling with this growing threat of wildfire.
In many ways, yeah, they're on the front lines of this crisis, experimenting with all these new approaches, and they're sharing their successes and failures with the world. It's a testament to their resilience and their willingness to innovate in the face of adversity.
That's inspiring. It's a reminder that while the challenges are huge, so is our capacity for innovation and collaboration.
It is, and that's what gives me hope. We're not powerless in the face of this threat. By working together, learning from each other, and embracing a more holistic approach to fire management, we can create a safer and more resilient future for all of us.
As we've been talking about this California fire crisis, one thing that keeps coming back to me is just the scale of it all. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the images of these raging infernos, and the numbers are just staggering.
The numbers are definitely mind-boggling. Millions of acres burned, billions of dollars in damage, countless lives upended. But beyond just the magnitude of the destruction, there's this underlying sense of urgency, this feeling that we're at a tipping point.
It's like California is this canary in the coal mine, right?
Yeah, it's a stark warning of what's to come as climate change keeps intensifying. Yeah, that's a powerful analogy. And what's happening in California is not an isolated incident either. We're seeing this global increase in wildfire activity
Oh, absolutely.
from the Amazon rainforest to the Australian bush to the Arctic tundra.
Wow, so this isn't just a California problem, it's a global one with implications for all of us.
Exactly. And it really underscores the interconnectedness of our world. What happens in one corner of the planet can have ripple effects felt thousands of miles away.
You mentioned the Amazon rainforest, and I remember those devastating fires a few years back. The images of the rainforest burning, the smoke billowing into the atmosphere, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, and those fires weren't just a tragedy for the Amazon, they were a blow to the entire planet. The Amazon rainforest plays this crucial role in regulating the global climate.
Yep, sorry.
It absorbs huge amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
So when those forests burn, it's not just about the loss of biodiversity, it's about releasing even more carbon into the atmosphere, which further accelerates climate change.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle. Climate change increases the risk of these wildfires, and then those wildfires release more carbon into the atmosphere, which makes climate change worse.
Wow.
And it's not just about carbon emissions either. Wildfires release all these other pollutants into the air too, impacting air quality and human health far beyond just the immediate fire zone.
So we're talking about things like respiratory problems, cardiovascular issues, even increased risk of cancer.
Exactly, all linked to wildfire smoke. And as these fires become more frequent and more intense, well, those health impacts are just going to get worse.
It's a sobering thought. It highlights the need for, a multifaceted approach to addressing this crisis. We need to tackle the root causes of climate change. We need to adopt smarter land management practices, invest in fire-adapted communities, and we need to support those brave firefighters on the front lines.
I completely agree.
It's a monumental task, but it's one we can't afford to ignore.
We can't. And it's not just about governments and institutions taking action either. It's about individual choices as well.
So what can we do? What can we do as individuals to make a difference? It's easy to feel like our actions are just a drop in the bucket.
I get that. But, every drop counts. Reducing our carbon footprint is huge. Making choices that reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, supporting renewable energy, advocating for climate-friendly policies, all of these actions, when they're multiplied by millions, they can have a real impact.
And what about those of us who live in or near fire-prone areas? What steps can we take to protect ourselves and our communities?
Well, being proactive is key. Creating defensible space around our homes, clearing away flammable vegetation, choosing fire-resistant building materials, all of these things can significantly reduce the risk of our homes igniting during a wildfire.
And just having an evacuation plan in place, knowing the evacuation routes, being prepared to leave at a moment's notice.
Yes, all essential.
And just staying informed, right? Monitoring fire conditions, paying attention to weather forecasts, signing up for those emergency alerts.
All of that can give us the information we need to make informed decisions and stay safe.
Well, as I wrap up this deep dive, I'm struck by just how complex this issue is, this interplay of climate change, human choices, and the power of nature.
It really is complex. It's a reminder that we are all interconnected. Our actions have consequences, and we have a shared responsibility to protect our planet and each other.
And you know what? It's also a reminder that even in the face of these really daunting challenges, there's hope. There are solutions. There are people working so hard to make a difference, and there are steps we can all take to contribute to a brighter future.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the California fire crisis. We hope this is giving you a better understanding of this complex issue and inspired you to take action.
Thanks for having me.